America is considered to be the greatest country in the world, but we cannot follow like every other developed country. America is considered to be the greatest country in the world, but we cannot follow like every other developed country. America is considered to be like the greatest country in the world, but we cannot follow and adapt universal health care from every other developed country. And that's just ridiculous to me. That is pure insanity. But the reason why we don't have socialism and universal health care and good socialism is because America has shifted so far to the right, it's ridiculous. The reason why we don't have universal health care is because America has shifted so far to the right. The reason why we don't have socialism in America is because my country, the political spectrum has shifted so far to the right, it's absurd. The political spectrum has changed so much that my country has shifted so far to the right. The political spectrum has changed so drastically that this is just, right-wing, left, that the country's right-wing now. The political spectrum has shifted so drastically and so different that it's right-wing and left. I don't know what even means left-wing anymore. The country doesn't know what right-wing even means anymore. The reason why we don't have good socialism in America is because my country has shifted so far to the right that it's ridiculous, that it's absurd, that's almost fascist and Nazi-like, and it's stupid, and America does not understand that. America does not understand that. America right now, today, doesn't really get that. That's the unfortunate sad part about it all. My country so many times had redeemed itself, but always squashed the idea of socialism. And that's just because the reason why we don't have socialism and always squash the idea of socialism. And that's just because the reason why we don't have socialism is because those two Red Scares we had basically squandered the idea of socialism. And I personally believe the two Red Scares we had a long time ago basically fear-mongered the idea of socialism. I think because of the Red Scare, it fear-mongered the idea of socialism, and that's the problem. America has just gone ridiculous, and America has just to the point has gone fascist-like. Okay, there's been it abuses its own capitalism. Capitalism is being abused in America. Capitalism is being abused in America. America has gone ridiculous. So ridiculous, in fact, that like capitalism is like the only thing relying on America. Like capitalism is the only thing people rely on, trust, think it's a great idea. People think capitalism is awesome, but no, it's not. People think capitalism is the only solution, but no, it's not. But it's not. But to tell you the truth, it's not, and that's the problem. America is so inept. America has so many times to redeem itself, but it failed. It was so fast. America is a Nazi state. America had so many times to redeemed itself, but failed. There were many attempts for it to redeem, but failed drastically. But there were many attempts for this country to redeem itself, but failed drastically, and that's dramatically, disastrously, and that's the problem. America has gotten to the point that it's fascist now. America has now officially become, to me, a Nazi state, and that's the problem. And that's really the issue here. Why Canada's socialism and Britain's socialism is relevant to America and why we need it now. Like, we're behind, and that makes us jealous. Why Canada's socialism, why Britain's socialism is relevant, and why we need it now. Like, why we can just, because I think we need to adapt that kind of socialism, and why we need to adapt Canada and Britain, why we need that, and why we need to respect that, and why we need it now in America. Because I feel like we're behind from the whole world. And as a country, I think that just makes us jealous as a country, and that's the problem. I will go on and on. Video documentary. We're going to talk about why we need socialism in America, what socialism works in this country, the good aspects of socialism in other countries, what countries work with real socialism, while we're always socialist, and we're going to actually look into our socialist roots. In this video documentary, we're going to look into our socialist roots. We're going to look into our lost labor years. We're deep down, as a country, I think we were deep down socialist. As our country, we were, deep down, we were very socialist, and we had very socialist and progressive roots. We had very socialist and progressive ideals in us, but dark forces prevented that from happening and stopped real progress in this country, and that's the problem. In this Marxist view, and we're gonna talk about like that the right wing party, and that America has shifted to the right, and they stopped our progress, our real freedom in this country. We're gonna talk about my Marxist view, and we're gonna talk about why those forces stopped real progress in this country, and why those dark forces stopped real solutions and real freedom in our country, took away our freedoms, took away our liberty. And we're talking about the right, that the far right, that the far right has shifted to the country, why the far right took over the country, and how the country shifted to the far right, and why we need social change and real freedom and liberty, and why we need justice, and why we need real liberty. And this is a film that just talks about and documents that talks about real freedom and socialism in America. I hope you enjoy. And this is a documentary that talks about freedom, that talks about socialism. And this is a documentary that talks about why we need socialism in America, and why I believe we need socialism or anarchism to get our freedoms. Anarchism is the best solution. But so in this film, we're going to talk about why we need socialism in America, and why socialism is the best way, is the best ideal solution in America. I'm talking about why we need it and why we must have it. I'm talking about why we need socialism and the best truth of it, and why we need to talk about the truth of socialism and why we need it so badly. Why we need it so badly, and why we need the truth of socialism so badly. This is a documentary that talks about fighting for socialism, lost liberty, lost freedom. So deep down we were a very socialist country, and why we need socialism. Why socialism is good, and why we need it, and the roots of it, and why it's such a great thing. So let's begin. So I got a clip of Chris Hedges talking about the system that kind of speaks to me. So here you go. And just why America has just lost its spirit, and just how just corrupt the system is. And so here I got a clip of Chris Hedges talking about how we can have social justice and actual change in the country, but preserve socialism and
logical disintegration, especially with many Americans struggling with overwhelming debt, loss of status, and deep personal confusion. The lurid drama of Jackson's personal life meshed with the ongoing dramas in television, in movies, and the news. News reports on television are mini-dramas. They provide a star, a villain, a supporting cast, a good-looking host, and a dramatic, if often unexpected, ending. In Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury's novel about a future dystopia, people spend most of the day watching giant television screens that show endless scenes of police chases and criminal apprehensions. Life, Bradbury understood, once it was packaged, scripted, given a narrative, and filmed, became the most compelling form of entertainment. And Jackson was a great show. He deserved a great finale. Those who created Jackson's public persona and turned him into a piece of property, first as a child and finally as a corpse encased in a $15,000 golden casket, are the agents, publicists, promoters, scriptwriters, advertisers, video technicians, recording executives, public announcers, and television news personalities who orchestrate the vast stage of celebrity for profit. They are the puppet masters. No one achieves celebrity status. No cultural illusion is swallowed as reality without these armies of cultural enablers and intermediaries. The producers at the Staples Center in Los Angeles made sure the 18,000 attendees and television audience, and even the BBC, devoted 3 hours to the tribute, watched a funeral that was turned into another maudlin form of uplifting popular entertainment. The memorial service for Jackson was a celebration of celebrity. There was the queasy sight of groups of children, including his own, singing over the coffin. Brooke Shields, fighting back tears, recalled how she and a 33-year-old Jackson, who always maintained that he was a straight male, broke into Elizabeth Taylor's room the night before her wedding because Michael was too excited to wait until morning to see the wedding gown. Shields and Jackson at Taylor's wedding then, quote, pretended to be the mother and father of Elizabeth Taylor. It sounds weird, Shields said, but we made it real. There were photo montages in which a shot of Michael Jackson shaking hands with Nelson Mandela was immediately followed by one of him with Kermit the Frog. Celebrity culture reduces all of the famous to the same level. Fame is its own denominator. And every anecdote told about Jackson seemed to confirm that when you spend your life as a celebrity, you have no idea who you are. And yet we measure our lives by these celebrities. We seek to be like them. We emulate their look and behavior. We escape the messiness of real life through the fantasy of their stardom. We too long to attract admiring audiences for our grand, ongoing life movie. We try to see ourselves moving through our life as a camera would see us, mindful of how we hold ourselves, how we dress, what we say. We invent movies that play inside our heads with us as stars. We wonder how an audience would react. Celebrity culture has taught us, almost unconsciously, to generate interior, personal screenplays. We have learned ways of speaking and thinking that grossly disfigure the way we relate to the world and those around us. Neil Gabler, who has written wisely about this, argues that celebrity culture is not a convergence of consumer culture and religion, so much as a hostile takeover of religion by consumer culture. Jackson desperately feared growing old. He believed he could manipulate race and gender. He transformed himself through surgery and perhaps female hormones, from a brown-skinned African-American male to a chalk-faced, androgynous figure with no clear sexual identity. And while he pushed these boundaries to the extreme, he only did what many Americans do. There were 12 million cosmetic plastic surgery procedures performed last year in the United States. They were performed because in America,
Author John Nichols, who's a great author and journalist, by the way, and John Nichols made this speech about socialism, why we need to preserve socialism in America. So I have this clip of, so what I'm going to show you is this clip of journalist and author John Nichols, who's a good journalist and author. And he's going to have a speech. He's giving a speech about socialism and why we need to preserve socialism in America. And everything what he says is kind of relevant about socialism and the history of socialism. But he talks about, like, real socialism. But he talks about the real history of socialism in America and the real aspects of socialism in America. And he's going to talk about the roots of socialism and why we need socialism. It's great. And he's going to talk about the roots of socialism and why we need socialism in America. And that's great. It's great. And that's great. So, let me show you. So, here it is. So, for example, let's watch this. And so, for example, let me show you this. Let's watch this again.
Projects in America. And I believe that the great crisis in America is that as we have flowed money into our politics, and the Supreme Court has done us incredible damage. We just marked the 6th anniversary of their decision in Citizens United, but it's a host of decisions over the years in Buckley v. Vallejo and the McCutcheon decision, and now threatening labor unions. Decision after decision after decision that tips the balance, flows that money in. At the same time, our media has absolutely declined. We don't have, you look at any newspaper in America, it is less than it was 10 years ago. It is dramatically less than it was 20 or 30 years ago. Radio has not filled that void unless you can get Arnie's show. And the internet hasn't either. The internet gives us lots of bits and pieces, but doesn't begin to give us anything near that center of gravity that we used to have. And so organizations have to step in and ask the questions that journalists don't ask. And they have to force issues into the discourse, because if they don't, the Koch brothers and others will. This is the bottom line. Money in politics is not about electing candidates. Money in politics is about defining the debate, and defining it so narrowly that your range of options are what those who flood the money in want. That's the bottom line of what's happening in our politics. It is a crisis. We have people pulling at it on both sides this year, and that's exciting. But frame that debate. And I think there's a fantastic project that's going on nationally in 2 states, Iowa and New Hampshire. And it's the American Friends Service Committees Governing Under the Influence Project. And for those of you that don't know about it, I could explain it all, but that's what the mistake that people make when they do introductions. They tell you what the person's going to say. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to introduce one of my heroes, Olivia Zink, from the Governing Under the Influence Project. And thank you so much for coming out. And can I just tell you, what an amazing thing with Donald Trump. That we don't even call him Donald Trump anymore, as Olivia said, the Donald Trump. So, on that happy note, let's talk a little bit about socialism. Let's talk a little about socialism. Now, I did not anticipate when I wrote the book, The S Word, that democratic socialism was going to, as quickly as I thought, become a big deal in America. It was my sense it might take a few more years. But I want to begin my remarks tonight by celebrating the person who I believe has done more than anyone else to take this concept of democratic socialism, which was really pushed to the edges of our politics, pushed to the edges of our discourse, and to make it central to what we as Americans talk about. And so, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Sarah Palin. I'm not kidding. I know some of you may have thought I was going to mention someone else who's been in the news recently, but I give my regard to Sarah Palin, and let me tell you why. About 6-7 years ago, when I was starting to work on this project, I was listening to Sean Hannity on Fox News. Now, as you know, no media outlet talks more about socialism than Fox News. And Sean Hannity was on, and he had Sarah Palin on his show. And they were talking about the horrors of the Obama presidency. And they were terrified by a new plan from President Obama. They were calling it out. They were exposing it. Weatherization. Yes, the Obama administration was urging people to weatherize their windows so the cold didn't get in. And they were actually providing tax credits and other benefits to those who weatherized their houses. And Sean Hannity turned to Sarah Palin and said, "You know what that is?" And Sarah Palin said, "Socialism." And I thought to myself, if keeping the cold out is socialism, I better write a book about this. Because my sense is that people are going to like this idea come winter. And the incredible thing is, that sounds so absurd, but over the last maybe 8 years, ever since Barack Obama became president of the United States, our friends on the right have been screaming about socialism. They're not really screaming about socialism. They're screaming about a president they don't like, and they're trying to make him the other. They're trying to make him foreign. They're trying to say, Barack Obama, he's not really one of us. He's a socialist. And in fact, they've done it so much for so long that when President Obama was interviewed a while back by Jeff Salaney from the New York Times, at the end of the interview, the New York Times reporter asked the president, "By the way, I know this is kind of kooky, but are you a socialist?" President Obama, taken aback, said, "Oh, no, I can't, everything I do is very capitalistic." And that was the end of the interview. Amazingly enough, I read about this in the book. About an hour or so later, at the New York Times office, the phone rings, and they say, "It's the White House." This never happens in journalism. They said, the president is on the phone. He just wants to clarify something from the interview. Jeff picks up the phone, says yes. The president says, you know, I think I was maybe a little bit glib there. I just want to make it absolutely clear. I am scorchingly, totally, 100%, absolutely the most that could ever be not a socialist. I'm the most not socialist person you ever met. And he had like a list, which meant that the government of the United States paused for a few minutes on some day in 2009, I believe, to make sure that they could come up with a list of all the reasons that they weren't socialist. And this is a big deal. It's a fascinating thing, because they didn't have to work that hard. Let us be clear about how they're not socialist. When they had a chance to reform our healthcare system in a way that would absolutely assure that every single American had...
So here's a clip of Chris Hedges, John Nichols speaking. So here's a clip of Chris Hedges speaking about the deformity of America and fascism of America, and the history of fascism in America, the morality conception of America, and he talks about why the empire is collapsing.
Somebody better keep track of the time, because we won't. On some of the themes that have been prominent in a lot of Cornell's work and that I picked up in the latest book, Wages of Rebellion, The Moral Imperative of Revolt, which came off of 3 books that I look at as a kind of trilogy. Death of the Liberal Class, which talked about the collapse of liberal institutions, Empire of Illusion, The End of Literacy and the Triumph of Spectacle, which talked about that severance from a print-based culture and often a reality-based culture, the degradation of both the intellectual and moral life of modern society. And then the last book, which I did with the great cartoonist Joe Sacco, Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt, which is written out of the poorest pockets of the United States, the sacrifice zones, those places that went first in this great predatory campaign of corporate capitalism, where of course now the entire planet has become a sacrifice zone. Camden, New Jersey, per capita the poorest city in the United States. Pine Ridge, South Dakota, where the average life expectancy of a male is 48. That is the lowest in the Western Hemisphere outside of Haiti. At any one time, the people in Pine Ridge, 60% of the people in Pine Ridge have neither electricity or running water. The coal fields of southern West Virginia, where we are destroying the Appalachian Mountains for coal.
So here's a clip of a John Nichols speaking about the history and roots of socialism in America, about the deformity of America. Another one is author and journalist John Nichols, who talks about the history of socialism in America and the roots of socialism in America, and why deep down we are a socialist nation. Socialism was deep down rooted in America when it comes to our lost labor years, and that deep down we are a socialist nation. Deep down we are a socialist nation, and that we love socialism, and that America deep down cherished socialism.
So Conyers, you owe me. And let me also say how proud I am to be here as we honor Steve Babson and Marjorie Mitchell for their incredible work. And you know, it's always the case that you have to listen to a keynote speaker before you get to the really good part. And I am so honored to be here tonight to honor these folks as well. Steve Babson and Marjorie Mitchell for their incredible work. Give them a round of applause, please. So, I don't know what you were doing this week, but I was covering the election for President of the United States of America. And it's an interesting thing that it seems like 1,000 years ago, but a week ago today, Saturday, there were some people that didn't think Barack Obama was a sure bet to get reelected. There were people who were scared. There were people who were uncertain. There was this thing about how this was going to be a close election. And you know, we all fall into the trap. And you know, the funny thing about it is some people fall deeper into the trap than others. My friend Karl Rove had a very difficult time Now, this is the terrible thing about it. On Tuesday night, I was down in Toledo at the Teamsters Hall. We were broadcasting on MSNBC. I suggested a crazy concept for MSNBC. I said, instead of going to a political party hall, instead of going to where all the pundits are, why don't we take a camera and go and broadcast from a union hall where the people who are actually re-electing the president are going to be? We went down to Toledo, Ohio. It was very exciting, but I have to say, I really missed watching Fox that night. Because poor Karl Rove, there's a problem on the left and the right, let's be clear. Problem on the left and the right. Sometimes we can talk ourselves into things. We believe things, because everybody we know is saying it. Why, I bet you everybody at this front table, you say, socialism's not that bad on you. Why, socialism could probably win a referendum at this front table. And you see, when you keep talking to yourselves too much, you can convince yourselves that everybody else believes the same thing. Well, that's what happened to Karl Rove. He's sitting there on Tuesday night, they declare Ohio for Barack Obama, and Karl Rove said, well, that's wrong. So that cannot be the case. The state of Ohio cannot have voted for Barack Hussein Obama. And he then, of course, because it's nice to know that in this ever-changing, rapidly evolving world, some things stay the same. Karl Rove thought something was wrong, so he sent a woman to go and check on it, Megan Kelly. So she got sent down the hallway to go check on whether the numbers were wrong. But here's the interesting thing about it. Here's the interesting thing. Everybody's like, wow, how could Karl Rove be such a fool? How could he make such a fool of himself? Well, actually, it was experience and practice. Because in the year 2000, Karl Rove said that the results that showed Al Gore won Florida and the presidency were wrong, and he got a Supreme Court to go along with him and steal the presidency from the American people. So this is not the first time he tried. And we learned only one lesson in 2000. We learned one lesson, and it was a good one. If you want to beat Karl Rove, you can't win small. You got to win big enough so he can't steal it from you. So all our friends it's a very interesting thing on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, I heard all these prominent people hailing Barber from Mississippi. I like being in a place where there's a moan when the name Mississippi. So Haley Barber from Mississippi, the former chairman of the Republican National.
But people like FDR, John Robert Kennedy were more of progressive capitalists, progressive Democrats. The time when Democrats were progressive, but they were more considered to be progressive capitalists. Not socialism, but close to socialism, but reform and redeem the system right. Marxism is the right answer. It was the only time when America was close to socialism, but socialism done right. It was the only time when economic relief policy worked, and that this progressive era actually was beneficial.
Billy Mills said, "There's no doubt in my mind that he was shot because of the positions he has taken."
Peace. 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 Some say that it is useless to speak of peace. Peace, 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 peace. Too many think it is unreal. Peace. Too many of us think it is impossible. Peace. Peace. Peace and freedom. Peace and freedom. Freedom and peace. Peace and freedom.
Not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom.
Genuine peace, genuine peace. In a just and genuine peace. Means of assuring peace. world peace. World peace like community peace. A world of peace. Pursuing the paths of peace. The strategy of peace. For peace is a process. There is no single simple key to this peace. Universal peace and goodwill. Peace need not be impractical, and war need not be inevitable. We must therefore persevere in the search for peace. First, examine our attitude towards peace itself. I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuers fall on deaf ears, but we have no more urgent task. I speak of peace, therefore, as the necessary, rational end of rational men.
Bringing peace to them.
A peaceful revolution for human rights. For too long, my country, the wealthiest nation in a continent which is not wealthy, failed to carry out its full responsibilities to its sister republics. We have now accepted that responsibility. In the same way, those who possess wealth and power in poor nations must accept their own responsibilities. They must lead the fight for those basic reforms which alone can preserve the fabric of their societies. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Here at home, the future is equally revolutionary. The New Deal and the Fair Deal were bold measures for their generation. But now this is a new generation.
This administration has failed to recognize that in these changing times, with a revolution of rising expectations sweeping the globe, the United States has lost its image as a new, strong, vital, revolutionary society.
The long view shows us that the revolution of national independence is a fundamental fact of our era. This revolution will not be stopped.
I believe in an America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will, directly or indirectly, upon the general populace or the public acts of its officials, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference.
We need a permanent unemployment insurance program so that there are those who want to work and can't find a job will not be shifted and living on a marginal income without hope for themselves. These are things which other countries in Western Europe did 30 or 40 years ago. Great Britain, and we regard ourselves as a progressive society, had these provisions at the time of the First World War. And yet this is suggested as a most radical proposal. We have to, in the next 8 years, build as many school buildings as we built in our entire history. And yet, we have found it extremely difficult to secure support for this vital program. We cannot leave the 17 million people who have retired and who may become ill. If they have no money, under the legislation now in the books, they have a chance to receive some as indigents. But that is not the way we believe it should be done. And if their son happens to have some money in the bank, they do not qualify. And he goes and pays out, and it may break him at a time when he has responsibilities to his children. why it is so difficult to secure passage of a minimum wage, paying somebody in interstate commerce $1 or $1.10 or 15 cents, I do not understand. But it is regarded in some circles as highly radical and highly inflationary. For the first time, unemployed men can retire at 62. For the first time. And I do not regard this as a particularly radical proposal. Dependent children can receive aid for the first time in our history without the wage earner deserting his family. In the old days, before this act was passed, if a child was undernourished, it was necessary for the wage earner to desert his wife and family in order that those children should qualify for assistance. But last year that was changed.
The president's willingness to abandon tradition was responsible, in part, for his failure to succeed with the business community, in spite of efforts at conciliation.
I don't remember the figures exactly, but the president was not extremely popular in Texas, nor was he in the country.
I am delighted to have a chance to say a few words about this administration's policy, which has been the subject of a good deal of discussion, acrimony, and controversy on wages and prices and profits. Now, I know there are some people who say that this isn't any business of the President of the United States, and and who believe that the President of the United States should be the honorary chairman of a great fraternal organization and confine himself to ceremonial functions. But that isn't what the Constitution says. And I did not run for President of the United States to fulfill that office in that way. Harry Truman once said there are 14 or 15 million Americans who have the resources to have representatives in Washington to protect their interests. And that the interests of the great mass of the other people, the 150 or 60 million, is the responsibility of the President of the United States, and I propose to fulfill it. Then I believe it is the business of the President of the United States to concern himself with the general welfare and the public interest, and if the people feel that it is not, then they should secure the services of a new President of the United States.
It was not all that popular in the country, and his popularity had diminished considerably, as a matter of fact.
Businessmen are welcome at the White House. And I welcome the chance to address business meetings such as this. Not because I expect that it will necessarily affect the results of elections, but I do think it can affect what this country does.
He was characterized as being anti-business, and part of that was, I think, the result of his actions with respect to steel prices.
The simultaneous and identical actions of United States Steel and other leading steel corporations increasing steel prices by some $6 a ton constitute a wholly unjustifiable and irresponsible defiance of the public interest. In this serious hour in our nation's history, when we are confronted with grave crises in Berlin and Southeast Asia, when we are devoting our energies to economic recovery and stability, when we are asking reservists to leave their homes and families for months on end, and servicemen to risk their lives, and 4 were killed in the last 2 days in Vietnam, and asking union members to hold down their wage requests, at a time when restraint and sacrifice are being asked of every citizen, the American people will find it hard, as I do, to accept a situation in which a tiny handful of steel executives, whose pursuit of private power and profit exceeds their sense of public responsibility, can show such utter contempt for the interests of 185 million Americans. A few gigantic corporations have decided to increase prices
in ruthless disregard of their public responsibilities. Some time ago, I asked each American to consider what he would do for his country. And I asked the steel companies. In the last 24 hours, we had their answer. I realize that there are some businessmen who feel only they want to be left alone, that government and politics are none of their affairs, that the balance sheet and profit rate of their own corporation are of more importance than the worldwide balance of power or the nationwide rate of unemployment. But I hope it's not rushing the season to recall to you the passage from Dickens' Christmas Carol, in which Ebenezer Scrooge is terrified by the ghost of his former partner, Jacob Marley. And Scrooge, appalled by Marley's story of ceaseless wandering, cries out, "But you were always a good man of business, Jacob." And the ghost of Marley, his legs bound by a chain of ledger books and cash boxes, replied, "Business? Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. Members and guests of the Florida State Chamber of Commerce, whether we work in the White House or the State House or in a house of industry or commerce, mankind is our business. And if we work in harmony, if we understand the problems of each other and the responsibilities that each of us bears, then surely the business of mankind will prosper. And your children and mine will move ahead in a secure world, and one in which there's opportunity for them all. Thank you.
No one was more hostile than the Southerners of the far right. Not only were the Kennedys showing themselves soft on communism and in favor of civil rights for black citizens throughout the South, but Kennedy had hurt their pockets by scaling back oil depletion tax credits.
But Texas was home to Kennedy's most dangerous opponents.
Oil millionaires and billionaires in Texas were petrified of one major factor that John F. Kennedy was considering, cutting the oil depletion allowance. And there was no way they were going to allow that. Essentially, they would save billions of dollars if it stays as it is. It was called a 27.5% oil depletion allowance. John Kennedy thought it was too liberal.
If a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich.
Big business is using the stock market slump as a means of forcing you to come to terms with business. Their attitude is, now we have you where they want you. Have you seen any reflection of this attitude?
I can't believe I'm where big business wants me.
We are anxious to live in harmony with the Russian people.
Communism in reality is not a political party. It is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life. It reveals a condition akin to disease that spreads like an epidemic. And like an epidemic, a quarantine is necessary to keep it from infecting this nation.
A warning to the American people not to fall into the same trap as the Soviets, not to see only a distorted and desperate view of the other side, not to see conflict as inevitable, accommodation as impossible, and communication as nothing more than an exchange of threats. No government or social system is so evil that its people must be considered as lacking in virtue. The hard reality of life in much of Latin America will not be solved simply by complaining about Castro, by blaming all problems on communism, or generals, or nationalism.
The Republican National Chairman has said that your administration's attitude in general is one of appeasement toward communism throughout the world. Do you have any comment on this criticism by top spokesman of the opposition party?
No, I don't.
And still hail the Russian people for their many achievements in science and space, in economic and industrial growth, in culture, in acts of courage. Among the many traits the peoples of our two countries have in common, none is stronger than our mutual abhorrence of war. Almost unique, among the major world powers, we have never been at war with each other. And no nation in the history of battle ever suffered more than the Soviet Union in the Second World War. At least 20 million lost their lives. Countless millions of homes and families were burned or sacked. A third of the nation's territory, including 2/3 of its industrial base, was turned into a wasteland, a loss equivalent to the destruction of this country east of Chicago. Our primary long-range interest in Geneva, however, is general and complete disarmament, designed to take place by stages, permitting parallel political developments to build the new institutions of peace. Let both sides begin anew the quest for peace. Before the dark powers of destruction, unleashed by science, engulf all humanity.
It is therefore our intention to challenge the Soviet Union not to an arms race, but to a peace race. Let us call a truce to terror. The logical place to begin is a treaty assuring the end of nuclear tests of all kinds in every environment under workable control. We also proposed a mutual ban on atmospheric testing without inspection or control in order to save the human race from the poison of radioactive fallout. Together we shall save our planet, or together we shall perish in its flames.
In our day, certain economic truths have become accepted as self-evident. A second Bill of Rights, under which a new basis of security and prosperity can be established for all, regardless of station or race or creed. Among these are the right to a useful and remunerative job, the right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation, the right of every farmer to raise and sell his products at a return which will give him and his family a decent living, the right of every businessman, large and small, to trade in an atmosphere of freedom, freedom from unfair competition and domination by monopolies at home or abroad, the right of every family to a decent home, the right to adequate medical care and the opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health, the right to adequate protection from the economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment, the right to a good education. All of these rights spell security. And after this war is won, we must be prepared to move forward in the implementation of these rights to new goals of human happiness and well-being. For unless there is security here at home, there cannot be lasting peace in the world.
Are called the clear realization that true individual freedom cannot exist without economic security and independence. Necessitous men are not free men. People who are hungry and out of a job are the stuff of which dictatorships are made. In our day, continued President Roosevelt, these economic truths have become accepted as self-evident. And I want to ask my guest today if these days he thinks that is quite so true.
Less true than in Roosevelt's time. Under the assault of some conservative thinkers and under some of the political pressures of the 1980s, many Americans have embraced an anti-government theology, I would say, which fortunately doesn't fit our practices, but which makes it hard to think that the right to education, the right to a chance at a good job, the right to a home, the right to eat, that these things are a part of human rights.
But in a sense, in this wonderful book of yours, you say, stop me if I'm wrong, that that is almost a European concept, not an American concept.
Yeah, Roosevelt's Second Bill of Rights has turned out to be lost in the United States. So very few Americans even know about this extremely important part of our history. But the Second Bill of Rights has turned out to be one of the best American exports. So in Europe and even in Iraq now, the constitutional understandings often include a right to a decent chance at economic well-being and the right to education and the right to basic opportunity. So European constitutional thinking really is inspired by Roosevelt. That's our export, but we've lost it at home.
You say lost it at home. Yet if you were to look at the years right before Roosevelt, you would say that it wasn't really part of more than the protest movements in this country. Wouldn't that be true?
In the years before Roosevelt?
Right.
I think Roosevelt's presidency had an arc, and an arc which is in its way even more important and more dramatic than Lincoln's presidency's arc and then George Washington's. Those are our three great presidents. And what Roosevelt started, even in his campaign in 1932, to do was to say people have a right to work and a right to live. And he organized those two central rights, the right to work and the right to live, under the idea of security. And so before Roosevelt's great Second Bill of Rights speech, he himself had been speaking in these terms for well over a decade, and it was very much within American culture to think of these things in terms of rights. He made it more concrete and vivid and dramatic with the Second Bill of Rights proposal, but it didn't come as a bolt from the blue.
Now, you distinguish between the first Bill of Rights, obviously, and the second, and you give, well, not second-class citizenship to the Second Bill of Rights, but you look at it differently.
Yeah, well, Roosevelt didn't want to change the text of the Constitution. So he didn't want to add the right to a good education or the right to a home or the right to Social Security in the text of the Constitution. In that sense, he was a conservative, and he liked to say, I am that kind of conservative because I am that kind of liberal. And what that means is a liberal who respects our constitutional tradition and our text and doesn't tinker with it a whole lot. What Roosevelt wanted to do was not to put the second bill in the Constitution, but to follow the model of his hero Thomas Jefferson, who was responsible for the Declaration of Independence, a declaration which isn't part of our legally binding texts, but which helps animate our self-understanding of the Declaration of Independence in many newspapers every July 4th. What Roosevelt wanted to do was say the second Bill of Rights, including education, a chance at a job, a right to be free from domination by monopolies, a right to a home, a right to Social Security, that's a kind of promise or commitment that helps define who we are as a people, just like the Declaration of Independence. It doesn't mean that it has lower status than the original Bill of Rights, but it means it's not fundamentally for judges and the Supreme Court, it's fundamentally for the public, something the public can point to and hold its representatives to account.
You mean you can't even use the word penumbra here?
Well, Roosevelt was president in an era in which the Supreme Court was...
I think Chris Hedges said best of why there's no need to reform and redeem. There's no redeeming quality for reform. Reform will go nowhere. In America, can't even redeem itself. Can't even redeem itself, and that's the problem. And I think John Nichols is another great author. He summarized what socialism, and then why deep down consciously we are socialists, and when it's the main issues we are socialists. So I think he made a good point about that. I think Chris Hedges makes a good point about about the founding fathers' Constitution. And campus called the right. I think he made a good point about college campuses. Like liberals are not really dominating. I think he made a good point about liberals are not really dominating college campuses, and that liberals you're not going to get liberal brainwash. And it's just a stupid right wing. He exposes the right. Liberal brain. Liberals are not mind controlling you. Liberals are not changing you. Liberals are not the ones that are, making you into a different person. No, that's the problem. No. It's just he exposed the right-wing echo chamber argument of that one. I like that. And I think he exposes America's fascism and our roots of fascism. Deep down, he exposes the system and the corruption at hand. Okay, and we are a disparaged nation. He talks about the Constitution, so the constitutional founding fathers, and that deep down the Constitution has socialist elements, and I think the Constitution needs to be updated. I think the Constitution needs to be updated and changed. And so in the founding fathers, not all of them perfect and good. It needs to update. I think the Constitution needs to update and change. And he talks about the founding fathers, and that a lot of the founding fathers are corrupt and they didn't care. A lot of them are good and some are bad. Like, a lot of them are actually good, some are bad. There was a lot of good, underrated founding fathers. There's a lot of good and underrated founding fathers with those principles, but a lot of the founding fathers were slave owners or were supporting the same system of their own eyes. They were slaves. So, not just the fact they were a slave, but they support the same system that would benefit them and nobody else. They were slave owners, yes, but they support the same hierarchy system, monarchy system of their own benefit in a secret society. It's not just the fact they're slave owners; it's the fact that they support a secret society and they support a hierarchy, a system that not just benefit them, but support an oligarchy and monarchy, and secretly support a monarchy. That's the problem. I think. I think John Nichols made a good point about America's socialism. And we need and that deep down we are consciously deep down socialists, and consciously Americans are socialists. The policies are socialists. So the policies are socialist, and we had lost labor years. We had communist and socialist parties. We were a political movement. It was lost labor, and we were progressive and progressive. Deep down, I think we're progressive and liberal. Deep down, we're very progressive and liberal. We had a lot of lost labor years. He talks about the labor years that we don't talk about that much. We have socialist roots, and deep down, we are very socialist. America has like socialist parties and socialist movements. And I think deep down we have what's considered to be these lost labor years where America supported labor. America had labor unions, and we're a very socialist nation. And I think we need to change the system. You can't preserve it, you need to destroy it. I'm in the belief we need to destroy the American system. America was always a fascist nation and destroyed progressive ideology. It's not just Marx. We need to, and I truly believe this. And I truly believe this. I think America needs to the empire needs to destroy itself. We need to destroy the system, I think. I'm in the belief that basically Karl Marx was right all along. Yes, Marxism is the right answer. Socialism is always the right answer. But I'm in the belief that Karl Marx was right all along. That we needed socialism. We need socialism. Socialism. The policies. Reform and progressive magical candidate can't change anything. Reform and progressive candidate can't really change anything. We need to change and reflect and save ourselves. America has always been fascist, and we are a very fascist nation. It will never change and stop. We are... And it's hard to beat that fascist. I believe we need to destroy the American empire. Okay. Destroying the American empire is not easy. Socialism has been progressive. They always thwarted the progressive people. And we needed socialism. Socialism is what we badly need in this country now. We need a marginal... No, we don't need like a marginal progressive candidate to save us. But they always thwarted the progressive. The establishment always despises and thwarts the progressive politicians and presidents. They always despise them. That's the problem. Why we don't have change in this country. They always try to destroy socialism in this country when we badly need it. And that's the problem. We need it now, and they're trying to destroy that. for us, and they're trying to destroy it for us, and I hate that. And we need change. We need change. Change. And America's always been a fascist nation. America's always been fascist. I believe we need to destroy the American empire. The American empire is collapsing anyways. There's no reason to preserve America. The empire is collapsing anyways. I think we need to destroy the American empire. There's no reason to preserve it and protect it. There's no reason for this country to redeem itself. It already lost its chances of redeeming itself. America's always been a fascist nation. It always had fascist roots, and that's the problem. Let it die. Let it kill itself. It needs to die now. There's no reason to preserve it and protect it. No. It needs to die now. There's no reason to back it up. There's no reason to preserve this country. There's no reason to revive it. America lost its chances to redeem itself. America lost its chance to redeem itself. Preserve it. There's no reason to. America's already failed to redeem itself many times. America's already tried to redeem itself many times, but failed. It tried, but it failed. And that's the problem. It needs to die. We need to kill it. We need to kill it and destroy it as quick as possible, and then remove it and die and kill it. And I hope this guy. We need to stop this madness. We need to just really stop this madness. We need to stop it now. We have to stop it. We have to do our best to save her. Just let it rot. Okay, there's no reason to save it. Okay, we have to stop this now. Okay, just let it burn. Okay, let it burn. No reason to help. There's no reason to save it. There's no reason to save it. There's no reason to save it. There's no reason to help it. It's impossible. So just let it rot. Okay, let this country rot. Let it rot. Let this country burn. Let it burn, as I say. So that's all I gotta say.
The time, the middle of the 19th century. The place, the American West. The Armed Forces Screen Magazine presents the covered wagon, backbone of the Western Trek, didn't stand a chance when it was traveling alone through hostile country. When attack came, the covered wagon could protect itself only if it banded together with other wagons. This was mutual defense. This was mutual security. We as a nation are able to live a peaceful life, but hanging over us all is the specter of a haunting and horrible fear.
The medium weight force is clearly the force of the future. It's a cavalry type force, and clearly the Indians are out there. That's politically incorrect, but we're dealing with cavalry and Indians again, and the cavalry is what we need.
In order to stop saboteurs armed with atomic explosives, we could search all planes and trains and boats and automobiles crossing our borders from now on. We could open every single package. We could remain on a constant 24-hour, day in, day out alert.
Man muss nämlich gut regieren und für eine gute Regierung auch eine gute Propaganda betreiben. Das eine gehört zum anderen. Eine gute Regierung ohne Propaganda kann ebenso wenig bestehen wie eine gute Propaganda ohne eine gute Regierung.
I was raised in a milieu where I was taught that communism leads to dictatorship and that capitalism leads to democracy. But it's not that simple.
The essence of a politician, of the political animal, is the pursuit of power.
You can say what you want about this country, and I love this place. I love the freedoms we used to have. I love it. I love that.
So what do they get when they are elected to office? They get power, not money, power.
Free market capitalism definitely democratizes a country and a culture. But corporate crony capitalism, of the kind we're seeing with this White House, is as antithetical to democracy in America as it is in Nigeria.
Power of concentrated wealth shall not be abused.
Americans Americans have to understand the difference between free market capitalism, which benefits our country, and this kind of corporate crony capitalism where we have large corporations running our government, and there's a name for that, and the name is fascism.
And we know now that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob.
A need to dominate, a need to control, and again, above all, a need to dominate.
The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything.
Big Brother is watching you. And the little people.
Obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money.
It's not a conspiracy.
And what he found was no criminal conspiracy.
It can't really be a conspiracy.
There's no conspiracy?
No conspiracy.
Everyone is saying the exact same thing on the exact same day. It's almost as if there was some kind of, I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for? Some sort of larger plan.
A need to control, a need to dominate, which is what leads people into politics.
The temptation to use public power and play God is almost irresistible.
I am Oz, the great and powerful.
As of now, I am in control here.
To the corrupt, thieving politicians of America.
We're not going to transform our fine FBI into a Gestapo secret.
And Franklin Roosevelt said that. He said fascism is the control of government by large corporations for their own benefit. And I close with this. I have an American Heritage Dictionary, the last edition, which I keep at home, which says it defines fascism as the control of government by large corporations with right-wing ideology driven by bellicose nationalism. If that sounds familiar to a lot of you.
Decisions are made on bases other than what is best for the country and what is best for the ordinary people in this country. They have other motives, other drives, other wants, other needs, and they exercise them.
I'm reminded of Tocqueville's remarks is when tyranny comes to the United States, he said it will be very, very quiet, and it'll be the sleep that comes over the somnolence that comes over quiet and pacific industrial animals, comparing us to sheep out in the meadow.
We were sure that ours was a nation of the ballot, not the bullet, until the murders of John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. We were taught that our armies were always invincible and our causes were always just.
Jesus, Gandhi, Lincoln, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, John Lennon, they all said, try to live together peacefully. Bam!
While survival of the fittest may be a good working description of the process of evolution, a government of humans should elevate itself to a higher order.
We apply social values, more noble than mere monetary profit.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged, and nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care.
The note is that we have dumbed the public down to the point where I think most people don't realize what they're missing. They don't know what's out there.
The great Oz has spoken. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
This is not a message of happiness or reassurance, but it is the truth And it is a warning